Hello, I'm Joe Pierce, and this is the second Inherit the Earth, Sand and Shadows Developers Report. In addition to a status report about the game's production, this report will also include an interview with Ed Lacabanne, one of the artists that is working on the game. And speaking of Ed, he is currently working on the backgrounds for the Temple of the Orb. He has completed work on the exterior view, which we can see here, and he is currently working on completing the interior version of the temple. I have been working on adding editing features to the game engine. This would allow the creation and modification of scenes directly in the game. This includes all features of the game, including images, audio, music, and voiceovers. The animator was busy last month with other important matters, so no progress has been made on the Rif animations. My guest for this report is Ed Lacabanne, who has been a video game artist for more than 20 years. Thanks for joining me today, Ed.
It's good to talk to you, and hello to all the listeners.
Let's start at the beginning. How did you become involved with the Dreamers Guild, the developers of Inherit the Earth Quest for the Orb?
Well, back in the old days, I was going to college. I was working toward becoming an illustrator. I was thinking I'd be like Drew Struzan, who did a lot of this colored pencil and airbrush artwork for movie posters. And that's the kind of thing I was trying to practice. And my friend Robert McNally, who was one of the people who started the Dreamers Guild, as you know, he let me know that there was such a thing as having a career in making video games, and I was already an avid player of games, so that sounded pretty good to me. So I decided that I would go over to the offices of the Dreamers Guild. It was Robert who pretty much showed me the ABCs on just how to use a computer, because I was pretty much in the dark about that stuff. And I would go over there at night and practice using an open computer, keeping an ear open and learning what it was like to work in a computer game developing office. And I learned how to make artwork in this new to me anyway, medium. And that's how I pretty much got started. And then when the Dreamers Guild got together and I was offered a job, well, I took it gladly too.
Was your first job at the company working on Inherit the Earth, or were there any earlier projects?
Yes, Inherit the Earth was the very first game I ever worked on, at the Dreamers Guild or anywhere else.
You contributed a lot of concept art for Inherit the Earth, including many illustrations showing characters interacting. Were you asked specifically to draw these interaction images?
Well, actually, I was asked to do some concept arts, some concept drawings of characters, but I don't think I was specifically asked to do the interactions that you mentioned. I think I had kind of a funny idea of just what a concept drawing should have in it, or what it should emphasize. Looking back, I think that probably the expectation is that it would show their clothing and what they look like. But I think that at the time I was trying to suggest some of the personality that I inferred from the description of the character. And in doing that, I had them interacting in these little scenes with other characters. You know, a shopkeeper talking to a customer, or Rif talking to, I think, a mole, if I recall. I mean, it's been a long time, but the idea was, I guess, to show something of their personality, when really it probably should mostly have been about what they were wearing and what they looked like. I think that it was April Lee's artwork that was really formed the kind of, solid model that the animators were later able to use when they made the characters for the game.
Also, from what I can tell, you created almost all the storyboards for the game. Who else on the project did you work with to refine these scene backgrounds?
Well, the storyboard forms I used, because the frames in the storyboard had the same aspect ratio as the screen for the art that I was going to be making. So I used it for making concept sketches of what would be in it. And I believe it was Talin primarily, and as well as Allison Hershey, who I worked with and from whom I got notes on what to change before it got into the final game. So of course you're going to notice that there might be some differences between some of the sketches and whatever made it into the game. But that was just part of it. That was part of the, working out what needed to be in and what the purpose of the scene was.
What artwork of yours appears in the released game?
Well, I did a lot, the majority, I would say, of the backgrounds, although there are at least a couple of really good backgrounds that Talin worked on himself in his spare time. I did the intro scenes. You'll see, like, I believe, pathway next to a tree and a fence, and then a waterfall scene that kind of looks like Yosemite Valley. I did that, although the credit for the part of that sequence that shows the cave paintings, that was Glenn Price who did that. But I did a lot of the tile sets as well. When you're walking around at the fair, or I believe there was one place that's the I think the mice or the rats had a big complex of underground corridors. That's the stuff I did as well. Talon had produced this tile set editor that I was able to use in conjunction with the regular art program. I was able to make the tiles and then place them, and so that was mine as well.
So Ed, overall, what do you think of the completed game? And do you believe anything could have been done better?
I like the game's setting and backstory. I like the idea of these characters who are running around trying to find things in the ruins of our civilization today or in the near future. If I were to be pressed to figure out what we might have done differently, then maybe I would say we could have had more to do within some of the spaces provided. And I'm thinking of the three-quarter view top-down areas with the tile sets. There were some zones that were probably a little too big for the amount of content that went into them. They may have just been ideal places to have a few more characters to meet, or objects to find, or quests to perform.
After Inherit the Earth, what other titles did you work on at the Dreamers Guild?
After Inherit the Earth, I worked on a game called Project Universe, and I also worked at the very beginning of its development cycle on Fairy Tale Adventure 2: Halls of the Dead. And in that game, what I did was I worked on tile sets, and I laid down tiles for its the main exploration area of the game.
What games have you worked on for other companies?
After working at the Dreamers Guild, I went on to work on a series of games that were based on Starfleet Battles, which is a pen and paper ship-to-ship tactical game. And those games were called Starfleet Command. The sequels are the ones that I worked on. After that, I went on to work on Knights of the Old Republic 2, and I did environments for Neverwinter Nights 2 as well, and Fallout New Vegas. And my most recent game is Dungeon Siege 3.
Since the beginning of this year, you have been the artist on the latest Inherit the Earth webcomic story, featuring Rif and the ferret named Koga. Is this the first time you've illustrated a serial work? And how does it compare to other projects you've been involved with?
This is the first time I've worked on a comic professionally. I have worked on another comic line that was of my own invention. It was called The Adventures of Puffy and Junior, and they were actually done by me as a child when I was writing for my young nephew. And when I say I did it as a child, it was more like I was probably about 15 years old. And to compare the different comics is one was done in a very informal way without any time frame or time limits or quality control at all. But it was fun to write the stories, and it involved dogs that were actually real dogs that my nephew and I both knew about, and the adventures they would get into. So anthropomorphic animals going about and having adventures is not a new thing. It's ironic that both of the comic books that I've been involved with have exactly that going on.
Finally, coming full circle, you are now drawing the background scenes for Inherit the Earth Sand and Shadows. How has the process of creating 2D game art changed since the early 90s?
Well, the first thing that pops into mind is the fact that we have much higher resolution images now, which allows them to look a lot better, but it also takes a lot more time to work on. I think the pictures that were in the original game are 320 by 200, and we had a limited palette, which is always a good idea anyway, but I think it was a limited palette that needed to be set so that the artwork could be produced over the course of the entire game with that one palette. It was an interesting challenge to try to figure out exactly how and where to use the colors to their best ability. And I would also say that I now know about styluses and tablets, which I didn't at that time, and I didn't have one. So I did a lot of the artwork for Inherit the Earth using just a mouse. And I don't know, you probably heard it said that it's like drawing with a bar of soap. So you can imagine that drawing with a stylus and tablet is quite a bit of an improvement. Now the next step would be to get a Cintiq. That would be my next goal.
Any final thoughts?
Well, I guess I would say that it's felt kind of like a privilege to be able to work in the field of game development. It's allowed me to work alongside a lot of intelligent and talented people. And so, as we continue that process going on into the future, I'm looking forward to continuing it, and I have high hopes for everything that's going on.